Welcome on into the Cougar Tracks podcast, powered by KSLSports.com. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. As you see, Ryder Lyons has committed to BYU football, unpacking what this means for the Cougars as they get the five-star prospect from Folsom, California, unpacking all of this in this edition of the Cougar Tracks podcast, which you can watch on the KSL Sports YouTube feed. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Also, the KSL Sports app as well. A big day for BYU football as the Cougars land Ryder Lyons, five-star quarterback in the class of 2026. Ryder made the announcement on the Pat McAfee Show on ESPN and YouTube, and this is how it sounded as Ryder Lyons made it official with Pat McAfee.
What does the future look like for you, Ryder? Where will you be playing football next?
I mean, for the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be going to Brigham Young University.
Okay, go Cougs!
Hey, Ryder.
Congratulations, Ryder Lyons, heading over there to beautiful Utah with BYU.
Yes, sir.
And the Cougars, who were 11-2 last year. Coach Kalani Sitake obviously been there, a staple for BYU.
Interesting stuff there from Ryder Lyons. You could tell maybe a little bit of nervousness because Ryder has been going through this process for years. And you think about it, BYU has known about Ryder Lyons even before the offer when he was an eighth grader. They have been recruiting Ryder Lyons for so many years, and now they've got him. And this is a significant moment for BYU football. You can go into all the historical data points of this commitment. First five-star quarterback in the 24/7 Sports composite rankings since 2002. The first five-star prospect in the 24/7 Sports composite since 2003 when they landed Ofa Moetau. First five-star quarterback probably since Jake Heaps. He was a Scout.com five-star prospect in the 2010 recruiting cycle. Had a massive, expectations placed on him. Ryder Lyons, though, is a legit prospect, one of the best quarterbacks in the country in a deep quarterback recruiting class in 2026. Ryder Lyons is among the best, and some would say he is the best, like Brandon Huffman from 24/7 Sports has said. I've noted on this podcast that Ryder Lyons is a perfect fit for BYU on the field and maybe more importantly off the field as well. He noted and confirmed on the Pat McAfee Show after his commitment to BYU that he does plan to serve a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, there's been talk that he's going to serve only a 12-month mission. Whatever that may be, he's planning on serving a mission before enrolling at BYU. It's a huge get, and it proves for BYU that they can get the blue-chip LDS prospect to BYU. They needed to get Ryder Lyons because you can't assume you're always going to have the opportunity to get a five-star quarterback who's LDS and has plans to serve a mission. This was as must-get as you're going to find on the recruiting trail. BYU had to get this done because if you can't get this guy, who are you going to get? Are you going to get the top-end LDS guys in the future? This signals that BYU is a player on the national landscape. Now, look, there's going to be nuance to BYU's targets. They're not just going to go extend offers to any five-star now. It's still going to be strategic. It's still going to be fit-based within Kalani Sitake's culture. But for LDS prospects, why would you not go to BYU now? I think it's a compelling pitch. I asked Kalani Sitake yesterday at the BYU Football Media Day golf event. I asked him what the pitch was to prospects, didn't mention Ryder Lyons, but to high-profile prospects that took official visits. And Sitake noted all of the things that recruits were pointing to as reasons to not go to BYU when they were an independent no longer apply. And yesterday he highlighted the resources, the commitment from the administration, on down. And you think this is just a high school prospect. What does that have to do with any of this? You've got to have the commitment, the alignment from BYU's administrators like President C. Shane Reese, Vice President Keith Vorkink, Athletic Director Brian Santiago, Head Coach Kalani Sitake, and then all of his assistant coaches. There's an alignment at BYU. The boosters want to win. BYU's highly competitive, and he's a great fit. And BYU also has a recent track record of producing NFL quarterbacks. It's not as maybe deep and decorated as Oregon's, but Kalani Sitake's program has produced NFL QBs. Zach Wilson being the most notable, Jaron Hall, Taysom Hill, who was coached by Kalani for a year as well. Ryder Lyons is an outstanding fit for BYU. He is a monster get for the Cougars, as you see these highlights. The playmaking ability of Ryder Lyons, his ability to escape and still make big-time throws deep outside the pocket on the move. You can't teach that. He's got a natural ability, and he's continued to evolve since he took on the starting quarterback role at Folsom High School as a sophomore. BYU now getting Ryder Lyons sends a message that they want to contend and be one of the top Big 12 programs. They've always wanted to be that since they joined the league, but this is another step in the right direction towards that because Ryder Lyons has the ceiling and the potential to be a special football player at BYU. He has got the ability with his talent and his skill set to be an excellent quarterback for the Cougars. I know Cougar fans get a little bit nervous because, as I laid out, the Ben Olsons, the Jake Heaps, you could even throw in Jacob Conover to a much lighter scale. They just haven't panned out. The high-profile quarterbacks at BYU have not panned out. The best quarterbacks at BYU have been the underrated three-star guys, Zach Wilson, Jaron Hall, or maybe guys that initially didn't pick BYU, Max Hall, Taysom Hill, and then they ended up at BYU. But BYU has not always had the great success in the 21st century with blue-chip prospects. But to me, Lyons' work ethic, he's kind of a gritty competitor. He's an intense competitor, which is something that Kalani and Aaron Roderick love in their QBs. I just think there's a great fit. And as you see these highlights on our YouTube feed from Huddle, Ryder Lyons' playmaking ability is just a great fit for what Aaron Roderick and Kalani want out of the position. Dual threat guy, can do it with his feet, great arm, and he's someone that just can throw the ball deep effortlessly. Great arm talent instantly. And it'll be interesting to see how BYU works with Ryder Lyons when he does come back from the mission. But to me, you give him every opportunity to go win the job and be a QB1. Look, to forecast what the quarterback position will look like in 2027 is just, that is just not worth your time. Yes, you can play the game and say Bear Bachmeier, McKay Hillstead, Enoch Watson. There's all these guys. You never know how things play out. So much moving pieces to how all of this comes together, especially for the quarterback position with only one guy getting the start in a given week. But to me, Lyons' talent warrants, regardless the status of the QB room, you give him a chance to compete right away and become a face of the program. To compete right there. This is going to be one of the most anticipated careers in BYU football history, and in BYU fashion, Cougar fans got to wait. They're used to that. They can wait. This is not anything different. Typically, when schools get a 5-star prospect, they'll see them next winter when the winter semester begins so they can get enrolled for spring ball. BYU is accustomed to waiting for their top-end prospects, and Ryder Lyons is atop the heap. The addition of Lyons sends BYU climbing in the 24/7 Sports team recruiting rankings. They go up from number 48 to number 31, 17 spots for one player. That's how big of a jump that leads to BYU in the team recruiting rankings. So they're knocking on the door of a top 25 class. And as you saw from this official visit weekend in Provo the past weekend, so many players could be joining Ryder Lyons. We'll see what the decision is from Jax Tanner. I talked with Jax Tanner last month at the Under Armour Next Camp at West High School, and he told me around July 9th, 10th, that's when Gage Tanner, his brother, who's expected to be a BYU football player, he's committed to the program. He's coming back from a mission. That's when he kind of plans to make his decision, and Jax Tanner has BYU, Oregon, Tennessee. BYU has a chance to beat out Oregon again. And I think that's one of the things that's interesting, too, about this commitment with Ryder Lyons is the narrative will just be BYU's pouring bags of cash at Ryder Lyons. Look, you have to have the NIL piece. Ryder Lyons was on the Pat McAfee Show with a Raising Cane's sponsorship. This man has immaculate aura. Even my kids, my oldest son, who's 11 years old, he's currently at BYU basketball camp this week. He's like, Dad, Ryder Lyons has incredible aura. He's known about Ryder Lyons for months, following him on YouTube and TikTok and seeing the Overtime Elite 7-on-7 work. He's got a massive following, Ryder Lyons. So clearly NIL had to be competitive if you're going to get into the conversation for a five-star talent like Ryder Lyons. So you had to have NIL. That's the starting point. But then it goes into all the fits. And I think that's what people underestimate about these decisions from college prospects. And this goes beyond BYU. Power conference programs can bring together resources to get any sort of competitive deal, for the most part, for one guy. But you've got to have the whole program around it to really uplift these players to get them to the NBA, to the NFL. You can't just say, oh, here, we're going to throw this bag at one guy and all of our problems are solved. You got to have the whole deal. And for guys like Ryder Lyons and AJ DeBonsa, they could have got money anywhere, big-time money. But then you had to go into all the fit, everything else that goes into it, and Ryder Lyons clearly sees BYU as the fit for him. I think it also helped too, and it's not, there's not the same, they're not the same recruitments at all. AJ DeBonsa was committed to BYU basketball last December, signed with the Cougars. That was a short recruitment, only about 6-7 months. Ryder Lyons has been spanning years. Since BYU got invited to the Big 12, that's when they offered shortly after, and they've been recruiting him ever since. But I think that AJ DeBonsa kind of broke the seal of why not go to BYU? If you're a five-star guy, why not? I know it's BYU basketball, and Kevin Young's got a different resume and different approach to his recruiting compared to Kalani, but why not? I just think that there's a lot of momentum for BYU sports right now. And look, I've been following BYU recruiting for really 30 years now. I've been following it. I've always been fascinated with BYU's recruiting efforts. People always kind of point to recruiting based on just the internet rankings, and they don't think recruiting actually existed in the 70s, 80s, 90s. It's like, folks, they had to build out rosters somehow back then. It wasn't just recruiting didn't begin in 2000. But, so I've been following recruiting in the 90s, and up to today, I mean, in my lifespan following BYU recruiting, BYU football and basketball recruiting, I don't think there's a better time in Cougar sports. The level of athlete that they are contending to get, it's pretty impressive. And Ryder Lyons is the type of guy, too, that you wonder what's going to be the domino effect. I mentioned Jax Tanner. What about Taue Akana, Orem High wide receiver, who played with Ryder Lyons on the overtime elite circuit with Cold Hearts? They had that TikTok together in the Lavelle Edwards Stadium locker room. Ryder still can't nay-nay. Taue Akana is a guy that would be a massive get for BYU. I watched him last year calling his game between Orem and Farmington. Special football player. BYU sees him as a wide receiver. Maybe he could play other positions as well, but wide receiver is there. They got Graham Livingston on the board added to the mix. Could they get Jackson Gates, a cornerback? I know it's the defensive side of the ball, but again, if you're getting a 5-star quarterback who could go anywhere he wants, if you're a guy like Prince Williams, an edge rusher from Bishop Gorman, why wouldn't you go to BYU? I was talking with Kelly Papinga yesterday at the BYU Football Media Day event. And again, these guys can't go on the record right now speaking about these prospects. But coming out of the official visits, Kelly Papinga told me they felt good where they stood with every player that visited. And look, there's some that they don't land. 2 weeks ago, they hosted Isaiah Naliai. He commits to Utah. You're not going to get everyone. But the feeling that BYU was just kind of like a token visit because a guy was LDS, or that probably going to lose out to this school. They got in the mix. It's game over. That's not the case anymore. And I think that's a good place for BYU to be. In fact, they're building up this brand, BYU Athletics, where schools are fearing them. There's this narrative that, well, if Ryder Lyons wants to be developed, he should go to Oregon. If he just wants the money, he goes to BYU. I saw that on duckswire.com, that line. And I thought to myself, Oregon. And I don't shame excess at all. By all means, Oregon turned themselves into a powerhouse because of brand, because of excess, because of money, and the Nike affiliation. They became a thing in college football, and now they are a power. So to suggest that BYU is just outclassing Oregon and when it comes to money, it's just funny how that is becoming the narrative. But hey, for BYU, lean into it. When BYU extends an offer, these programs should start sweating then, because there's this narrative building that BYU is just going to be bags you, I guess. But Ryder Lyons is a special football player for the Cougars. And on the discussion of BYU and Oregon, BYU is taking down the Ducks on the recruiting trail. Dan Lanning's an excellent head coach at Oregon, one of the best in the country. And Oregon's got, I talk about aura with Ryder Lyons. Oregon's got aura. They got clout on the recruiting trail. But BYU's taking them down. They got Ryder Lyons, Alai Kalani Ovalu, Batmoli Talo, who was once committed to Oregon. Now he's on the board for BYU's recruiting class. Austin Pay, who's currently serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He was recruited by Oregon, ends up with BYU. Cougs are doing a nice job. And it's a positive thing for BYU football that they are taking down the Oregons. Remember in the 2010s when it was, well, if Stanford offers, game over. If Oregon offers, if USC offers, game over. BYU just got Ryder Lyons, who many felt the top three was Oregon, USC, and BYU. They took down Western powers and get Ryder Lyons. It's a huge day. Kalani Sitake and his staff should celebrate. Now they got to get to the finish line. And, of course, signing day will be in December. Coaches can't discuss Ryder Lyons formally until he's officially signed. That's why you saw BYU football social media accounts just repost things and post celebratory gifts. It wasn't like AJ DeBonsa, who was already in the bag, signed, and then BYU had the chance to publicly comment. This is still going to be a waiting game, but I got to imagine there's going to be a lot of Cougar fans tuning in to watch Folsom High football games this fall. Folsom High, better get a good streaming deal because Cougar fans are going to load it up. I would expect that. Huge day for BYU football. Huge day for Ryder Lyons, who has many connections to BYU. You know, Ryder Lyons, his father, was a walk-on defensive back, JUCO transfer on the 1996 BYU football team. Tim Lyons. His sisters have graduated from BYU. There are a lot of connections to BYU for Ryder Lyons. And again, the feeling of prioritizing Ryder from the beginning and valuing him. I mean, what a get for BYU. When BYU hosted Ryder Lyons on an unofficial visit last year at the BYU Southern Illinois game, I kind of thought to myself, you know, it's pretty noteworthy that Ryder is going to this game. One, because he could go really anywhere in week one. I think he ended up still going to the USC LSU game the day after in Vegas on that Sunday. But understand that BYU was a 5-7 football team the year prior. Not much momentum heading into the 2024 season. They had a quarterback debate, but he was there to see BYU football, and BYU showed pretty well in that game. Again, game outcomes don't decide recruiting wins or losses. People always got to remember that. But I thought that was significant at the time because it could have been easy to say during that 5-7 campaign for BYU, oh, the momentum for the program's gone. Reality check. Big 12's here. BYU is just going to be a middling program. But getting that 11-2 season, the way that the quarterback position played with Jake Retzloff, the connection he's formed with Aaron Roderick, it was a good year. And Ryder then visited BYU again in November for that cold game against Kansas. The pooch punt from hell. I always call it that. It was just a freaky, crazy game, but Ryder was there pregame, and the BYU Rock was saying, we want Ryder. Ryder was loving it. You just kind of looked at him and thought, this guy looks and feels like a BYU guy. But will he actually commit there? Because so many times in the past, many guys that looked and felt like BYU guys didn't pick BYU in the end. And Kalani gets it done coming out of high school with this edition of Ryder Lyons. Think of all the times that they lost out on Puka Nacua, lost out on many players. They get them later down the road, but they didn't get 4 years or 3 years with that guy because they couldn't get him out of high school. Well, now they got Ryder Lyons. Maybe now Kalani Sitake is no longer going to have to say, we just want to get these guys now out of high school, because so many of these players in recent years, they left BYU at the altar. They liked what BYU was throwing down, but they ultimately didn't sign on the dotted line. Ryder Lyons clearly liked what BYU was putting down, and he's now a BYU Cougar, and he made that official on the Pat McAfee Show. He is committed, and Ryder commits to BYU over the likes, again, of Oregon, USC, Ole Miss, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama. I mean, we could go on and on. Arizona State, Utah offered. The list goes on and on. He had dozens of offers, and he's going to BYU. The Cougars get a massive win, landing Ryder Lyons. We're going to have full breakdown on KSLSports.com throughout the day on this edition of Ryder Lyons, but wanted to get some of the reaction from you Cougar fans on this edition of Ryder Lyons. London BYU fan writes, crazy to see what a level playing field has done for BYU. In the space of 4 years since NIL really became a thing, we're now beating out blue bloods for the guys we want. All BYU needed was a way to get to the table. You can't argue with that. Again, it goes to my point of I followed BYU recruiting for 30 years. They've never been in the mix for this level of prospect consistently now. You know, Ryder Lyons is elite. You can't always assume you're going to get a 5-star QB every cycle, but BYU's in the mix for 4-star guys. You got Brock Harris. You got Bot Molitalo. Those would have been dream recruits in the independence era. Like, how do you get those guys? You don't. You probably don't. When Georgia was making their push for Brock Harris, when Michigan was making their push, you think independent BYU is going to get that job done? No. Kalani Sitake's program, also on top of the NIL piece, which is key, which is critical. It's a starting point. But they've also won, too. 2020, 11 games. And I know you can knock the schedule. I get that. I always point, though, to Zach Wilson's comment on that, which I think is a fair one. They were beating what recruiting rankings said were their peers, and they were hammering them. They finished 11-1. 2021, 10 wins. 2022, 8 wins. A little bit of a dip. 23, big dip, 5 wins. Last year, 11. So you got 3 years out of 5, 3 different QBs producing double-digit win seasons. You're now building momentum and consistency and stability in the program that you're going to consistently win at a high level. Daniel Evans on X writes, seems BYU has entered a different level, and the trend lately is up. Ivan Gamez writes, is his mission going to be 1 or 2 years? I'm just wondering how quickly he gets back to Provo. He said previously in interviews that it'd be 12 months, but that's a personal decision for him. Mandy Jones, what a fun time to be a Cougar. Number 1 basketball recruit and number 13 football recruit in the same cycle. What? Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It is pretty crazy to see where BYU is going. Lyons, the numbers finally on him. Number 19 overall prospect in the 24/7 Sports Composite. So that's an aggregate of all the recruiting services. Number 5 QB in the class, number 5 in California. 24/7 Sports, their own rankings, have Ryder as the number 1 prospect in California. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year last season, and he's entering his senior year at Folsom High. Gonna be a lot of fun. We, again, will have full coverage of Ryder Lyons' commitment on KSLSports.com, the KSL Sports app, and a lot more breakdown on the addition of Ryder Lyons to BYU and the 2026 recruiting class. I'll talk to you next time here on the Cougar Tracks podcast, and you can follow me on X at Mitch_Harper, Instagram, TikTok, Mitch_Harper as well. I'll talk to you next time here on KSLSports.com.